Trevor, I don't know who's running with this part two of the MS4.
I'll let both Trevor Thompson and myself. Well, good evening, Mayor, City Council. Trevor Thompson and I are here for support, but it's going to be our contracted engineer, Sean Tracy. I see Sean's on here. He's got a PowerPoint presentation that he wants to run through and talk all about our new MS4 permit. So turn it over to Sean, and if you'd start, Sean, by introducing yourself to the City Council, that would be great.
Sure. Hello, City Council, Mayor. Thanks for having me again. I'm Sean Tracy. I'm a lead scientist and project manager with HR Green. I've worked on a few things over the years off and on with the city, but most currently I'm trying to finish out helping the Trevors with their 2020 MS4 general permit application. So I've got a presentation here that I want to run through. It's a lot of content. Some of the stuff may be new for some of the folks here, but what I would suggest we do is if anybody has a question on any of the slides in particular, feel free to just stop me, flag me, and I'll try to do my best to address it. I'm going to share my screen here in just a second. And let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can
Okay.
see your screen.
So you should see the Baxter, Minnesota 2020 MS4 general permit. Okay. Like I mentioned, the three of us, or the Trevor's got together and asked me to help out with this application process, and we spent a day in the office with Mary and Trevor and I, kind of kicking things off, and we've been addressing the permit application. So I want to give you a bit of background about what the MS4 permit is, and where we're at, and where we're heading in the future here. So first off, MS4 is just an acronym for Municipal Separated Storm Sewer System. Most cities have storm sewers, and any city that is populated with a certain population size that owns and operates a storm sewer system is regulated by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, who acts as the local representative of the Environmental Protection Agency to protect waters of the state. The MS4 permit is generally designed to reduce the amount of sediment and other pollutants entering state waters, like the Mississippi River in your case, and some of the lakes that you have within your municipal boundary. So it's designed to reduce the amount of untreated stormwater that makes it to the waters of the state. Entities that are regulated with the general permit must develop what's called a stormwater pollution prevention plan and adopt best practices within that plan for implementing the plan. So it's a little confusing, but the MS4 permit is acting as your surface water or your stormwater pollution prevention plan. The acronym for that is SWPP, SWPPP. So the permit/SWPP contains a set of tools and programs designed to meet the permit requirements. Like I said, the foundation of that is your city code. You've got a great city code. It meets the vast majority of the requirements. The only thing it's not meeting is the new requirements, which you'll have a year to address. They're very minor changes to your city code. The city code just lays out the regulatory language for erosion control, stormwater treatment, illicit discharges. It's got information in there for how you respond for enforcement or non-compliant projects within the city. Currently, Baxter's not required to address any impaired waters. That's also part of the application process. The Mississippi River was recently listed as impaired for sediment. That listing came after the release of the permit application, so you're not on the hook this year for the next 5 years for addressing that portion of the permit application, but 5 years down the road you will be. There's a little bit more to the application process that goes into that, but I'm not going to dwell on that right now. But suffice it to say, you want to be prepared for that for when the time comes. The important kind of take home about your SWPP plan is that it's comprised of 6 what are called minimum control measures, or MCMs. And they're really designed to guide the city staff through various processes to meet the intent of the permit. Here's a kind of a pie chart illustrating what each one of those 6 MCMs are. There are plans for education and outreach to the public on stormwater related issues, plan for getting annual feedback from the public on your SWIP. It's a requirement that the public has an opportunity to review and provide comments. There's a plan for documenting the most likely sites and land uses that could generate illicit discharges, and that plan also addresses how to manage them. So think of your public facilities, buildings, et cetera, wherever you house likely pollutants, and how you actually apply some of the things like road salt, for instance, goes into this MCM3 for illicit discharge detection and elimination. The other 3 plans relate more towards construction site plan reviews and inspections, site plan reviews and inspections related to permanent stormwater BMPs like stormwater ponds. And then the last MCM there, 6, has everything to do with plans for additional inspections and management of municipal facilities and stormwater structures within the city of Baxter. Each one of the MCM plans provides essentially an introduction describing the intent of the MCM, along with specific details such as standard operating procedures and inspection content, what you need to be inspecting, and how you document what things you need to be documenting, so that when you do your annual reporting, which is part of your SWIP requirement, you have right at your fingertips all the information you need for your annual report and make it a little more efficient for you. It does things like prioritize construction site inspections based on specific metrics, topography, erodible soils, for example, and does a couple of other things like identify partnerships for implementing the SWIP. So in your example, your best partner right now is the Crow Wing SWCD, to help out with that first MCM related to education and outreach. And we're currently talking with Melissa Barrick at the Conservation District about what that might look like in terms of that partnership. The other big take home of each one of the plans is provides a schedule for implementation of the plan. Did somebody have a question there, or was that something else?
Chris, hi. I'm going to present to Baxter City Council soon, but it'll be like
somebody's not on mute.
Mute yourself
Can
there.
we put Pete on mute, Kelly? Peter Lemke.
That happens a lot to everybody. So let's see. This next slide shows basically the process of the application. So far on this process, as I mentioned, we've all kind of sat down with staff, and I've also worked remotely on addressing a lot of these things. The MCM plans, you didn't have a lot of very explicitly defined plans, so we worked hard to develop a plan for each one of those MCMs. You should know that the city of Brainerd donated theirs as sort of go-bys, and we're sort of working in tandem with Brainerd on a lot of these things with the city of Baxter. So there's some uniformity, some standardization between the two cities of some of the content, and in particular, the MCM plans or standard operating procedures is a great example of that. So right now we're at a point where the application is completed, ready to be submitted. The application deadline is the 15th. What'll happen then is the MPCA will review it, address any concerns they may have with the application content. Then we respond to it, resubmit if there are any comments for that. It'll go on public notice for 30 days after that point, and then at that point, the MPCA will make a final determination of the permit and initiate the activation of the 2020 permit. Permit cycle is 5 years, as I alluded to earlier. You then, at that point, have 12 months to respond to any new content in the MS4 permit. There was a pretty systemic overhaul of the permit this last year. But actually, it's been several years in the making. The release of it was delayed by a couple of years as the result. So once the MPCA makes that final determination, the permit will be issued, and then we'll have 12 months to address any new content. In regards to new permit content, I've got a bullet list here. I don't expect you to read all of this. Some of it is really easy. Some of it takes a little more time and effort to do. We got a little bit of a jump started on it already. Like I mentioned, with developing during the development of some of the content related to the MCMs and the plans and various checklists and documenting tools. We've already started to include some of that 2020 permit new content in there already. We just started to, we're a little bit ways down the road. There will be some minor regulatory requirements for city code, and 12 months is more than adequate time given the new content. It's fairly minor. There is more explicit language now. Actually, there hasn't been in the past, so they've added quite a bit more language about salt management and pet waste, and a lot of that has already been addressed in terms of the MCM plans. There might need to be a revision in city code here and there for some of those related items. The next set of slides sort of focuses in on the various MCMs. And again, there's a lot of content here. I do not expect you to follow all of this. The take home from this is to illustrate that the staff and I have worked together to develop a work plan, an implementation plan of various issues or things we need to be doing, either for our SWIP development or for when staff needs to go out, how often staff need to go out and do various activities, implementation activities related to the management of the program. So you should have a copy of this. You can look at it in more detail if you like. So there's a MCM1, the public education and outreach. There's various items there, components with a deadline. Some of them need to be done before the submittal, and some of them, and all of that has been taken care of already. Some of it we want to get taken care of right away, like you'll see a May 15th deadline. Other things, though, the vast majority of them are going to be related to items that can be addressed over that 12-month period to come into compliance with the new permit language. So again, the take-home message here isn't for you to understand each one of these items, but to begin to understand the level of complexity, I guess, and all the various moving parts related to managing an MS4. It's not a small task. There's a lot of small things, a couple of bigger items that do require diligence in keeping track, documenting, and implementing. As in support of this table, we also have an annual implementation table for staff to use every year as they look at the year coming forward, what they need to do when during the year, broken out by month. So there's a nice roadmap, a go-to that's much easier than, rather than guessing and having to read the exhaustive permit. You can just go right to that implementation timelines and understand when you need to do what related to your plan. At the end of every year, of course, you then you review. One of the requirements is to review all the MCMs and decide if it needs to be adapted to meet any new needs. So then the big question that we needed to address was, what does it actually take to manage an MS4 permit program? This is a rough estimate. We have two columns here for each one of the items related to your SWIP. You'll notice that one column says 2020 hours. This is what Trevor Thompson did in the last year, so during the year of 2020. And then you'll see an estimated annual hours, which might be a little high, but I wanted to be conservative here. This is a lot of content, a lot of material. I don't believe that 1536 would be what you'd need every single year. But for your first couple of years in particular, as your program is now at a place where it's robust, I suspect that you're going to need hours like this just to get things moving and get the machine working efficiently. So we reviewed the time that Trevor Thompson did over the year and then made some projections based on what you just weren't able to get to because of staff time availability for old permit requirements, as well as doing our best to project what it might take for managing new permit requirements. Like I said, as you go through time with this, now that you've got some tools in place to be even more efficient, these hours might reduce a little bit, but I can't really give you an opinion about what that might look like down the road. So again, we felt it's pretty important to understand the staffing needs related to the SWIP management, particularly because your time is short. You've got a lot of work in the city. It's a very active city with a lot of demand on staff to make sure everything works well. The other reason is that about every 5 years or so, 5 to 7 years in some cases, cities will get audited by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. Their SWIP will get audited. And what happens during that is a representative from the MPCA comes in, sits down, and will ask you very explicit questions about your program, and then request proof. So as an example, I'll just start at the top of the list. Minimum control measure number 1, education and outreach. The agent could come in and say, do you have an explicit plan that meets all of the requirements of the permit? And you can say, yes, as a matter of fact, it's right here. And here's where all these different permit requirements are met. They're like, great. Do you have a schedule that's been adopted for implementation of this plan? And you can say, yes, it's right here. Do you have documentation for every effort that you did for education and outreach? And does it meet all the requirements for record keeping? And you can say, yes, it does. We have this form, and all of the content that's in the permit for requirements is recorded, and it's right here. So there's 2 advantages of having that set up that very efficiently and robust. Number 1, it saves staff time a lot of time. If you're unprepared and you don't know where this content is, it can take days to get through the audit process, which means days of not addressing construction site, plan review, site review, what have you. The other thing is it makes the MPCA's life easier, which is always a good idea. And the other thing is, if you have everything, all of your boxes checked and all our I's and T's dotted, you avoid potential fines. If the city doesn't meet the requirements of the permit, and there is a deficiency somewhere, or even if you have it in place, but you don't have records of it or some proof that you actually do it, you can be fined. So it's been a fundamental goal of this process of going through this application to ensure some risk management for the city, and also to get our heads around what needs to be done over the next year in terms of meeting old permit requirements, developing tools and methods to help streamline and increase efficiency for staff, and to assure that we have all the I's and T's dotted and crossed. And then to lastly, like on this slide, project ahead what we might be looking at for at least the first few years of the new permit cycle. This was a very major overhaul of the annual permit, or the 5-year permit, I should say. And in as such, it took a bit of effort, a lot of basically balancing checkbooks, if you will, and getting things up to snuff. There's still a little bit of work to be done for the new requirements, but that is what we're going to be helping with the city on for the next for the rest of the remainder of this year, is coordinating efforts to meet all the requirements that we need for the new permit language. I want to remind you again that we're working in tandem with the city of Brainerd to realize some efficiencies. We also want to make sure that content is very parallel, if not identical, between the cities where it can be. That way, somebody that's coming in from a construction project, say, working in the 2 cities, already knows what the playing field looks like. With that, again, I apologize. It's a lot of information. Some of it may be new, some of it may be old. But I'd be happy to take any questions that people may have related to this effort or the permit itself.
Council, any questions or comments?
I have a question. Again, this is probably a nonsensical question, but this is a requirement, correct?
That is correct. Yes, it's a federal and state requirement.
Okay. And then maybe this is an answer that won't come from you, but maybe Kelly or Trevor, do we have the staff in place? That's a lot of hours when you look at the 1,500.
I can address that question, Connie. When we hired Trevor's position, we had hired 25% of it. We allocated 25% of his time for stormwater and the MS4 permit. And that's about what he did last year. If you look at, there's about 2,080 hours in a year, and he did around 500
Yeah.
hours last year towards the stormwater. The problem is that this new permit has got even more requirements. And what Trevor found out last year is that he couldn't meet all the current permit requirements at 500 hours. It takes more than 500 hours. We went after the most important things, which was the construction sites and making sure we do the inspections on a monthly basis, and then we do all the follow-up. So we took the big ticket items last year, but what this is showing, you go back to that one slide, Sean, them hours, not all of that 1,500 hours is for the new permit on an annual basis. Some is for the new permit, but some is for the existing permit that we're not doing. So yes, if our problem coming up is going to be that we're not going to have enough staff hours on an annual basis to commit to 1,500 hours. Now, Sean's hoping too that he's estimated a little high, but he's still thinking these first 2 years to understand the new permit is going to take a lot of work, on staff's part to understand it, get it up to par. Then maybe by the 3rd, 4th, and 5th year, maybe it won't be quite as extensive as the 1,500 hours. So it is an estimate. But yes, I think that what you'll probably see in the budget coming up is a possible part-time position. This summer, we took and added the engineering intern.
Okay.
To get us inspections done on the existing stormwater ponds. We're going to tackle that this summer. So that'll take some of those hours on an annual basis out of there. That'll help, but it's still not going to make up all of it. So.
Yeah, and that's a concern because everyone is already working so hard and has more than full plates.
Yeah, we're probably going to have to look at a part-time position starting in 2022 or 2023.
Okay.
And that, to be honest with you, that is why we took and teamed up with Brainerd, is Paul Sandy, and over there is the city engineer. And he's looking at the same thing. He's going, this new permit, there's no way that he's got enough staff hours either to keep up. But Paul and I talked, he says, would the city of Baxter be interested in looking at a shared position between the two cities? And I said, I think we should discuss it. I think that's, and then we talked about, well, if we would head down that path in the future, then both of our systems should be set up alike so that the person could cross the river and work in either city and not have different rules and regulations to follow. So that's why Sean is actually working for the city of Brainerd and the city of Baxter. And then we got one other city too that we're kind of mirroring. Sean, if you want to explain that.
Yeah, the city of Arden Hills. We're the city engineer for Arden Hills. And I should also add to that, Trevor, just last week, the city of North Oaks has requested our assistance as well. We haven't even started with them, so right now they're not sharing anything your direction. They have nothing to share, actually. But City of Arden Hills actually is another great partner. They actually contributed very heavily to the first MCM1. They had a plan in place. They didn't have any plans for any of the rest of them, unfortunately. Those all came from Brainerd. And I should say, even though we got some go-bys from the other two partnering cities on this effort to help kind of reduce the amount of work that is required to get each one of you up and running. There was some pretty extensive overhaul of those MCM plans / standard operating procedures, but it was very helpful to get that content from Brainerd and Arden Hills.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
One thing I would add, Daryl, for the rest of the council, is that our stormwater enterprise fund is what we use to fund the MS4 permit requirements. Roadside mowing is also in there, but stormwater pond cleaning, all of the MS4 permit, it's all funded. It's not funded by the general tax levy. It's funded by the stormwater enterprise fund. So just stormwater fees are paid by both commercial businesses. Commercial businesses pay by the square foot of impervious surface that they have on their entire site, and then residents pay per household on a monthly basis. So it is funded through an enterprise fund versus property taxes.
Well, I don't know. I started reading through that permit last night. I thought, well, this will be a breeze. And half hour later and 2 sandwiches, and I was still going. That was unbelievable.
There, Mr. Mayor, I've done this before, but this is the kind of thing you only do once every 5 years, and it's unanimous across the municipal and consulting world that it always feels like you're starting from scratch when you start one of these efforts. And so the feeling that you got was shared by people that deal with SWIP programming and stormwater related management on a day-to-day basis. And even myself as well, when I first opened this up, I was taken aback. But one of the good things that came out of the permit this year is the MPCA went well above and beyond what is required of them to make our and your lives easier in the way that was documented. Each one of the 174 questions, many with sub questions. One of the questions had 64 sub questions. Every one of those had a parenthetic reference to the actual permit line item, which made my life so much easier. But yes, it's a lot of content. There's just a lot of moving parts.
Well, shame on me, but my first thought was, boy, this is government at its finest with all of these requirements. And it almost seemed like the questions were getting, after a half hour, they were getting kind of redundant even, but that's for somebody that doesn't know what he's talking about. But anyway, as long as we got people that know what's going on to keep us out of jail.
Yes.
We'll be appreciative.
One other thing I think we should explain to the mayor and city council, Sean, is this year, this permit for the first time requires a legal signature of the city and we only have 2 legal signatures in our city, which is the mayor and Kelly as the city clerk. That's our 2 legal signatures.
Correct.
For the permits before, I signed them. Daryl and Kelly didn't have to sign them. So the action that is on the city council agenda at 7 o'clock tonight is to give Daryl the authority to sign the permit so that Sean can send it in for the city of Baxter. But you might want to talk about that, Sean. That was a new requirement. This
Yeah,
go around.
you know what I can do real quickly, just to illustrate that, is to actually bring it up on the screen.
They're really making sure the MPCA is making sure that the governing body is fully aware of this permit and legally binding.
Well, it sounds to me like a shot across the bow as to who's going to be going to jail.
They definitely want to get your attention. Let's just put it that way. I don't see, and I know that there may be other people that would disagree with me, but I really don't see the MPCA as an adversary. Case in point, North Oaks is in a really difficult position right now. They have nothing for a stormwater program, and for some reason, they've avoided fees or penalties. And we just had Monday a discussion with the director from the MPCA for the permit, Dwayne, and he was extraordinarily helpful and doing everything he can to help the city come into compliance, including suggesting we do a 30-day extension for their application process. And he gave us advice on how to fill it out since they didn't have anything. So my experience has been very positive, but you will notice that, they're very clear that, this is a legally binding document. It does relate to Minnesota rules and regulations as defined by the legislative body. And that we are aware that there are significant penalties for submitting false information, which we are not. We're not submitting false information, including the possibility of civil and criminal penalties. So you're covered on this. We did not falsify any information in here. We were very honest. And so that's the first thing to be aware of. So when you're signing this, you're saying that the content in here is accurate. And we worked our tails off to make sure that it is accurate. And we've all reviewed all the content, and we all feel very good about what we've put together here. If you are deficient in something, it's possible you would get a penalty in the form of a fine. I believe the city was fined in the past for something that really should, in my opinion, is a little bit weird, seeing as how it was a project that really probably wasn't in your jurisdiction. But all that being set aside, the first legal thing to be aware of is, we're submitting this document, and we're saying that everything in here is accurate, and we feel very confident that everything in here is accurate. Once we get through doing the final updates for the 2020 permit, new language, you should not have any penalties unless you don't actually implement the plan. Fill out the forms, document what you do. That would be where you could get into trouble. But that's why I'm stressing that it's important to have good staff time dedicated to this. If you end up going down the road of sharing a staff person with Brainerd, that's probably your best case scenario, because that person's time, the vast majority of, or a good portion of their time, is solely dedicated to implementing these programs. And that's always going to be more mitigative than having someone just touching the program implementation occasionally or opportunistically.
Okay, council, anybody else? Either Trevor got anything to add to this before we move on, or?
I think we're good, Daryl.
Yep.
Okay.
There we go.
Well, that pretty much said it all from Trevor's kids.
Yeah.
Is that a motion? Okay, if we're done with that, Trevor, we'll drive on to number 4, Inglewood Drive Railroad Crossing. Who's running with that, Trevor?
We'll turn that over to Peter Lemke. Peter, yeah, there's Peter.
I'm here, Trevor. Hi, Trevor.
If you want to take and introduce yourself again, Peter, to the group.
I will. Hold on one second. I'm going to share my screen. Thank you, Trevor, Mayor, council members. My name is Pete Lemke. I'm the project manager for the city's 2022 Inglewood Drive Railway Crossing and Associated Roadway Improvements Project. And tonight, I'm here to give you a high-level summary of the project, and then I want to just have a discussion, answer any questions you might have, and address any concerns. Having your consensus tonight allows the project to move forward with many things that need to occur before we kick off construction in the summer of 2022. And I'd say the next step that we want to accomplish is have a public engagement process. And so we're thinking of a virtual public meeting in late April or early May 2021. This is a footprint of the project. I also have the layout with me tonight. If we have any questions, we can zoom in. But I feel like you are all familiar with this, but it's generally a work on Foley Road from Highland Scenic Road over to 4th and Road. And then we're doing work at the intersection of Isle Drive and 4th and Road. And then we are relocating the railroad crossing on Knollwood Drive to Inglewood Drive. And so with that, I'll move on. I'm going to jump right into the layout. And generally, we're going from west to east, and then in some areas, north to south. And we have a lot of information to cover, but I think it might be best if you want to interrupt, if you want to ask any questions, if you want to discuss something, let's just raise your hand, interrupt me, and I think that'll be best. So from Highland Scenic Road to west of Knollwood Drive, the two main things that are happening here is we're doing a full depth reclamation, or we call it an FDR. And we're also going to move the road to the north to create a 5-foot boulevard between the road and the trail. The original plan had us moving the trail to the south to create that 5-foot boulevard. But we think that it's going to be less impactful to the trees along that road, along that area. And then also, we think we're going to have drainage issues if we try to move that trail south and impact driveways. We may be pushing water onto some of the driveways that are out there. So to avoid that, I think we have a pretty good solution. Move the road north, create the 5-foot boulevard. And you can see that 5-foot boulevard right in here. And here's the 10-foot trail. And then here's the road.
Peter, does that mean that we're narrowing the current street to a narrower street?
We are.
What's the current width of the street right now?
I'm going to jump to the next slide, Trevor. I'm not sure. I'll have to verify that, Trevor, but I know that
I believe it's 32 currently.
Yeah, can I get back to you on that? Because I think we show it in the next slide with the typical sections.
Yep.
Or future slides. And so you can see here, this is another representation that the existing curb is here, the new curb is going to be here, the trail remains where it is, and then we slide everything to the north.
Can I just jump in, Peter? You made
Yeah,
a comment earlier about, we may have all this memorized, and I don't think you should make that assumption. I said that, this has been talked about for so many years that, I think you need to be methodical and help all of us refresh all of our memories as we go along this project.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that. And if I'm going too fast or skip over something, absolutely let me know. And so this is the 5-foot boulevard that we're creating that is consistent with the ADA transition plan that the city has developed. And then some other features of this is we're going to, as much as we can, salvage the existing road material, which is kind of what an FDR does. And then the kind of a cool thing about this is there's catch basins along Foley on the south curb line, but they all just drain to the north. There's no drainage along Foley. And so it really is cost effective to move that curb line, put in new drainage, create that boulevard, and preserve the trees, protect the trees, and then avoid drainage issues with those driveways. So it's kind of a nice solution that has a lot of pluses to it. So now we're going to move to the east a little bit. So now we're basically at the Knollwood intersection with Foley and Trunk Highway 210. And there's a few things going on here, so I'm going to try to explain them. But if you have any questions, certainly raise your hand. Let me know. So currently, Knollwood Drive like I said, at Fairview, 210 and Foley Road. The current plan is included in the layout tonight, and that's consistent with the city's long-term planning, and it's paid for with MnDOT LPP funds, which is local partnership program funds, which are in hand. I'm going to jump to the next slide, and that is basically we're going to cut the crossing off here. That gets relocated to Inglewood, and the signal gets removed. We're going to remove this little bulb on Foley, and then Foley becomes a T intersection. We're also going to do some work up here to remove the pedestrian features and take the crosswalks off of Trunk Highway 210 because there is no crossing here anymore, and so there's no need to have a pedestrian facility here. That's what this is showing on the screen right now is what's in the plan. It's what's funded by MnDOT, and it's what we want to move forward with. But related to that, MnDOT, as a separate effort, is creating, or they're developing the MnDOT Trunk Highway 210 corridor study through this area. And out of that study, they're recommending an RCI, and RCI stands for Reduced Conflict Intersection. And that's generally where you don't take left turns and you don't go straight across the road from the side street. You take a right turn and do a U-turn to accomplish your left turn. And I'm going to jump to the next slide and show that. And so basically, we're still teeing Knollwood at Foley. The railroad crossing is removed. The signal is removed. But there's a 3/4 left going north. And then if you're up here on Knollwood and you want to take a left to go east, you would take a right, do a U-turn here, and then continue on your way east. So this preserves all the movements of the planned, the one that's included in our layout, but there's some added safety features of an RCI, and I feel like this is MnDOT's ultimate solution. And one thing related to this, I'm going to jump back one slide. So city staff and council have not yet received a draft of the Trunk Highway 210 corridor study. And so I know that there's a lot that I'm trying to explain here, so hopefully it's coming across. Once you get that, you'll be able to comment on it. I'm going to jump forward. So there's another thing going on here, and I think what we're seeing is the MnDOT policy and then MnDOT practice and what can they implement. What MnDOT feels they can best implement with current resources is what we call a 3/4 left turn. And I'm going to jump to the next slide and show that. So same thing here, we're getting rid of the bulb on Foley. We're teeing Knollwood into Foley, removing the crossing. But what MnDOT wants to do is just create the 3/4 left to go north. And then if you wanted to go east, you would still take your right turn, and then they want you to go all the way up to Highland Scenic Road to do a U-turn. And they see this as more cost-effective than the full RCI right now. There are some issues, and some of that relates to church traffic and just taking a right turn here and going all the way down to Highland Scenic. We'd have to have the discussion about, is that a long way to go to do your left turn, and would people not necessarily do that and go and actually just come down Fairview over to Inglewood. And I did discuss that in the memo that was included in your packet a little bit, But we can have further discussion on that and even tonight or just in the future as needed. And I want to jump back for one moment to this slide. There a few considerations when we think about all this is schedule. You know, when does MnDOT want to implement the RCI? How does that affect the schedule for the for the Inglewood Drive project? Funding. If MnDOT wants anything to happen on their road, they should certainly fund that. Traffic operations. I talk a little bit about that in our memo. Safety. You know, is there any benefit MnDOT is seeing from an RCI over what we have planned for Knollwood that, you know, maybe makes that become the right thing to do? It's something we need to talk about. And then convenient and efficient route options. You know, like I talked about, I think it might be a bit much to expect folks to take a right turn here and then go all the way down to Highland Scenic to do a U-turn. And so, yeah, there's a lot to consider.
But if I could just share,
Absolutely.
I live off of Knollwood, and a few two constituents have said, why on earth would they take out that stoplight? So 2 people at least have raised the question. So just sharing that. 3.
Yeah, no, and that's a really good question. And I think just big picture, I think moving the stoplight to Inglewood promotes a long-term city goal of creating that west side road adjacent to Trunk Highway 371 for people to circulate and travel north and south through the city without having to go on 371. But it's a valid question. You know, why would you do that? Yeah, so
Peter, I'll interrupt you here.
yeah.
Peter, they will not allow a signal light at Knollwood and Inglewood right now on Trunk Highway 210. And why is that? Explain to the city council. What Connie's getting at is, why don't they leave the signal light at Knollwood and put in another signal light at Inglewood? That's what she's asking.
Yeah, thank you. So MnDOT sees that as inadequate signal spacing, meaning they wouldn't want to put 2 signals like that right next to each other. And then I think they would have a discussion about, is that signal warranted if we did move the railroad crossing and the trail crossing in to Inglewood?
Yeah.
That the signal at Knollwood.
The bottom line is that this is an interregional corridor, Trunk Highway 210, starting at 371 all the way to Motley is an interregional corridor. On interregional corridors, they will not allow signal light spacing to be any closer than 1 mile apart. They have to be 1 mile or more apart, or they're not allowed on this interregional corridor. So that is the reason, Connie, we can't put 2 signal lights and we can't keep the one. We have to actually move it.
Okay.
What we've been telling everybody for years is so we could get the railroad crossing lined up with our collector roads, was to take, and we were just going to swap Knollwood and Inglewood. Right now, Inglewood is just a stop intersection for Inglewood, and free flowing right and left onto Highway 210. We're going to move that to Knollwood, and Knollwood signal light and railroad crossing we're going to move to Inglewood. That is what everything's been proposed for many years with MnDOT. MnDOT then now, because they're doing this safety corridor study in Baxter on Trunk Highway 210, which starts at the Baxter West city limits and goes to Baxter Drive in Baxter, they're coming back with more recommendations for the future that they may or may not push onto us as part of this project. And that's what Peter's presenting.
Okay.
And I don't know, it's not, we haven't even seen a draft of the report yet, but yet they're starting to push things on us that I don't know if the city of Baxter agrees with. But I always thought that Knollwood was just gonna stay, just take the signal lights down, put a stop condition on Knollwood, and you were still gonna be able to make your free lefts out of there to go eastbound on Trunk Highway 210.
But, Connie's comments and points to me emphasizes that we have not done a good job of explaining all the reasons, for moving this. Number one, MnDOT has required it. But one of the compelling reasons for the city was that Knollwood dead ends in the swamp. Inglewood goes all the way up to the Pine Beach Road. So it was a more natural, this is in addition to everything else that's been said, but it would lends itself more to a parallel corridor to 371 for a longer distance. But they made it clear, the railroads made it clear for years that it's one or the other, you guys decide. We tried to get a stoplight coming off of Elder onto 210 by Costco. People were getting wiped out there too, and they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't hear of it. So they're very dogmatic about their road and their protection to it. But these are things that need to be really when we have that public input, we need to get into the minutia, and so everybody understands it.
Yeah, very much so. Thank you for the explanation on the signal lights.
Need to go back to 1998 when MnDOT put the 4-lane in and put Foley Road in, the frontage road, and what's come since then. And the city of Baxter's long-range transportation plan goes back to 2000.
Okay.
So yes, that's really good things that the public, we need to start over with the public. And make sure that they understand that this has been a long time coming, and what was all the steps along the way, Peter.
And in fairness to us, this thing has kind of started and stopped so many times that we dropped the conversation because it didn't look like it might ever happen, and now here we are, and we really probably haven't talked about it enough, but enough said for me.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Connie, and Trevor. I wrote down the comments the mayor said about making sure we have information about detailing and providing good information as to why that signal needs to move. So, are we good?
Let me ask another question, if I might, please.
Yeah. Yes.
So, you're gonna close off the entrance from Knollwood onto 210. And I agree. I think it was Peter said, if you want to go east, you're going to take from the north, you're going to take a right and go down to Highland Scenic and then make a U-turn and come back east. To me, that makes no sense at all. I agree with Mayor and others that have said that we really haven't explained it. Well, I've heard about this project over the years as well myself, and Connie, I also questioned, the moving the stoplight and moving the traffic light, but I was told that same thing, that they wouldn't allow a traffic light, 2 traffic lights within a mile. My question would be this: why not also close off the Knollwood access to 210 on the north side, and then people are going to just go on Fairview, I think it is, Fairview, to go east or west, simply doing the same thing on the north side that we're doing on the south side, or a dirty word, what about a roundabout there instead?
Mayor, council members, I think MnDOT would be reluctant to do a roundabout there, especially since coming out of their forthcoming 210 study that they're going to recommend an RCI there. I just think they would probably be reluctant to do that, but I wouldn't be opposed to engaging them on that question or asking them more information about why if that's something they would or wouldn't want to do.
What about closing off the whole access on the north and south side? What would be the answer to that?
So
MnDOT would love that. MnDOT would not have a problem at all shutting off the access to 210 on the north side at Knollwood. They would agree to that in a heartbeat. The problem is, and this is where Peter comes in, is it pushes all the traffic either to Memorywood or to Inglewood, and we don't have sufficient bulb outs. This goes back to the same problem that we had on Excelsior Road and Edgewood Drive over by Cub Foods. And that cost the city millions and millions of dollars to retrofit that. But Peter, you explained the traffic counts and what pressure that would put on Inglewood and Memorywood if Highway 210 was shut off on the north side.
yeah, I think Trevor, just I'll maybe add another point to that. I don't think MnDOT in their study seen many issues with leaving it open either. I think they wouldn't mind closing it. They'd want to close all access points to some degree, but I also don't think they saw any issues with leaving it open. I think it's beneficial to the city. I know we did a traffic analysis, and you can see it in the memo, Councilmember Ward, that was in your packet. And if just considering for Lord of Life Lutheran Church and Lakewood Evangelical Free Church, if we had made some assumptions about when they would exit their traffic, and we assumed that all of this traffic would come up here to Inglewood, because folks wanting to go east probably wouldn't want to go all the way down here to Highland Scenic to do a U-turn. And in the scenario where we had, I'll call it weekday signal timing, it didn't function very well. It was level of service F, and that basically the level of service is a measure of delay at an intersection. And the delay for these movements was quite high. I mean, it was in like 300 seconds, which is a long time to wait. It just, we did run it where we adjusted the signal timing here to favor this, and it got better. I think I'd have to look at the memo, but I think it was still level of service F, so generally unacceptable. I just think that there's a benefit to leaving this open, especially if it's going to function well. It's going to provide opportunities for route choice. We don't see any issues with like safety. If we knew it was going to be a crash problem, we'd say let's do something about it. But I think, and I'd have to, like I said, or like Trevor said, we have not seen that study yet. But I think what there's coming out of that is they're not seeing an issue with leaving it open. And I think they really see a benefit if we went to something like, I'll jump back here for something like this, an RCI. And as engineers, we study these types of things. Someone coming out here, taking a right and going right down here. Actually, that's probably quicker than going to Inglewood. These U-turns work really well. They make your left turns. They take it into 2 steps, and each of those 2 steps tends to be really safe. And they do eliminate some of those right angle crashes. And so I can see why MnDOT is recommending this. There's just all of these considerations that we need to think about.
But that's what you mean, Peter, by leaving it open and access to 210. You're not saying that they're going to allow it to stay open like Inglewood and 210 is today. They're gonna require something somewhere in the near future, such as this RCI.
Yes.
I just want to be clear. I mean, you say leave it open, and leave it open to me and probably the city council means that just leave it open as it is at Inglewood today. Why can't Knollwood stay the same as Inglewood is today? Just take the signal light and move it from one intersection to the other. And MnDOT, I don't think is going to allow that.
And Pete, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like MnDOT with these corridor studies is really pushing the RCIs. I mean, based off from the conversation we had with them, they kind of wanted an RCI at Inglewood, but we pushed back with the fact that it's a pedestrian crossing and we didn't feel like an RCI was sufficient for pedestrians. But otherwise, their traffic studies, for the most part, quite often come back with a recommendation of the RCI.
Yeah, it is definitely a tool in their toolbox that they like to use.
Well, let me throw another thing, if I may. I was involved with one of these up in Nisswa on 371 a few years ago when I was in the state legislature. And let's just say that somebody on Norwood Drive needs an emergency vehicle, whether it be a fire truck, police truck, ambulance, whatever. And it got into a lot of many discussions about emergency access to different areas. So if you close off Norwood on the south side, is that going to delay emergency vehicles getting to? It's getting to those people that perhaps need one, or Trevor, and that's you just made the point, Trevor, about just taking the light and moving it over. That was a heavy discussion that we got into on 371, doing the same exact thing. And I know what MnDOT wants. I know what MnDOT demands. But the fact of the matter is there's a certain number of people in the area that I'm speaking of that will not have the emergency service response time that they should have when these things are done that MnDOT wants done. And I'm very serious about that. If you follow my rationale and my input.
And are you following that, Peter? What Councilmember Ward's question is? I mean, if a fire truck or ambulance is coming from 371 210 intersection and they want to go southbound on Knollwood, is the response time going to be the same, less, or greater?
So driving down 210.
Yep,
to Knollwood,
they're coming from the
and then
210.
coming south.
They're coming from the 210 371 intersection.
Versus with our proposed project, you would come down 210, come on to Foley, and then take Foley over to Norwood.
Correct.
It's a good question. I'd want to maybe contemplate that a little more and
Sure.
Peter, if I might, let me throw this in as well, because we actually had trial runs with trying to have a fire truck make that U-turn. Think about that now. Having that fire truck make that U-turn for those people to access, the fire truck to access, whomever down there. And it was impossible to do. So let me, I wanted to throw that in as well.
Councilmember Ward, Jim Exted. They're not going to be making a U-turn. They're going to turn off at Englewood, get onto the service drive, and then go west. So I think there will be a reduction, but it's going to be seconds. That's just my opinion.
I don't think it'll be much longer response time, but I think Peter should run the numbers and get a memo back to the council on it.
I think Trevor, it might be good to get input from the Baxter fire chief too. Just being an expert at that, that's what they do. Yep. He may say, yeah, that's a concern, or it's not really a concern.
You use whatever resources you need to, Peter, to write them a memo.
Could I add something to that real quick?
Sure.
To Councilmember Ward's question about the response time. Does it also come into play for an ambulance getting back to Brainerd? Because we talk about a 3/4 intersection there at Knollwood Drive. And if you've got somebody in Knollwood Drive that needs emergency medical attention and needs to head back to Brainerd, now they're heading all the way down to Highland.
Trevor, you're cutting out, but
Trevor, I understand what he's saying.
Hold on, Pete. Let me just make sure that we clarify.
Turn around, or
Trevor,
they have to travel
We can't understand you, Trevor.
mute Trevor, Kelly. Mute him.
Frontage road. So, I mean, maybe that's an argument the city can use for leaving that as, we'll call it a full intersection.
Okay, thank you. Trevor?
No, what he's saying, Peter, is we need to explore the same thing on the north side
Yeah.
of Toucan. Why doesn't he mute?
He was. Didn't matter.
Kick him out if nothing else.
Was
We need
already,
to look at an ambulance or a fire truck coming out of Knollwood and heading back into Brainerd, especially an ambulance. An ambulance having to make either the RCI or go all the way to County Road 48 and do a U-turn, because they're not going to know enough. They're just going to come into the intersection. They're not going to know enough to take Fairview down to Inglewood. So we need to look at both scenarios, Pete, is what we're getting
Yeah,
at.
absolutely. Trevor, if I could make one comment on that too, just from like a human factors point of view, you know, I'll admit it. There's days I might not want to go down to Highland Scenic to do a U-turn, and I think people would see it as maybe inefficient, and we may be enticing folks to just, bypass the 3/4 left, going against traffic, and it's not something we want to entice people to do. So I think those are both kind of connected. Why make the ambulance go way out of the way, but folks might not want to do it either, and if no one's around, they might just do it. So
I think by showing that the ambulance takes longer to get back into Brainerd to the hospitals, I think is a reason why to leave it exactly the same as Inglewood and not put any 3/4 or RCI in, just leave it as a free flowing intersection. I don't think that the traffic counts are going to be high enough that it's going to hurt anything.
Okay, Mark?
yeah, I don't think you're giving our emergency personnel drivers enough credit there. There's no way they're gonna go down to 48 and make a U-turn. They're gonna take the frontage road. It's just like the fire truck coming to the south side on Knollwood. They're gonna jump off at the light and they're gonna take Foley Road. I mean, realistically, that's what they do, is they drive around town and they get to places quick. So
yeah, that's why Councilmember Cross, I thought it would be a good idea to get their input too. So
Just a couple of points here. I would think an ambulance driver coming down Knoll would do what people do up at Market Square. They go through the 3/4 anyway and take a left and come back. There's no reason for people to not encouraging that, but I think that water would seek its own level. But I think Mark's right. But just a couple of, for what it's worth, I know it's a year and a half or so different timing than what we're used to, but probably a couple of years ago, I had two contacts from people at Lakewood, and it's not just Sunday. They had a women's thing that goes on. It was either like Tuesday mornings or Wednesday mornings, and I guess they have like hundreds of people. And they were complaining because they can't get the people out of there. They have to wait and wait and wait and wait. And I don't know if MnDOT has talked to those churches, if they were part of the study, or if you people have, but we certainly will be, of course, when we have our public input. But I remember those phone calls, and I'm thinking, boy, if we shut that thing off, how much worse, if it goes back to what they were doing before this organization they had, how much worse, would it be if they would be backed up all the way down the service drive trying to get out on Inglewood there too. Also, everybody who has traveled down 169, south of Biowanamie or whatever, MnDOT's already put a couple of those U-turns in down there, and it would appear to be that that's the up and coming thing, and they seem to work well. And I don't know. I think they probably don't want to do it because they don't want to spend the money. I'm not sure where that's at in their mind, but.
All good input, which is what we were looking for tonight.
Can I ask a quick question as well?
Yep.
I guess, so effectively too, what you're talking about is what happens at the Morey's entrance to 371 at the north end of town, right? You're you're forced to turn right and then go up to the next intersection and make a U-turn there. There isn't even an option to go across that median there. But what I was trying to figure out here is on this slide, actually.
This one, keep it here.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to check the backstop on all this. I thought I heard implications that, there's a lot of discussion before any of this would happen. But what I was hearing you from the engineering point of view mention was it sounds like MnDOT can basically tell us we are going to pay for the improvement inside of their roadway, or was I misunderstanding that?
I think you have it right. MnDOT can do whatever they want on their road. They probably need city concurrence to put it in our plans, but that would then impact how we set up our plans based on what they want to do. And I feel like the city and MnDOT have a good relationship, and so Trevor should give input on this. But I think if it's something the city wanted to do on a decision maker level, like at the council, and MnDOT wants it, I think staff, we would for sure would implement it. It's just some of these considerations I have here, it would impact that.
But to your question, Council Member Tabbitt, is that MnDOT pays for this.
Okay.
What they're doing right now, though, is they allotted 1.2 million for all the improvements on Trunk Highway 210 that we proposed to do at Inglewood and Knollwood.
Okay.
And what they want us to do is they don't think that we need the 1.2 million to pay for everything. So they want us to pay for a 3/4 access at Knollwood out of that 1.2 million. In the sense then that we would be paying for it in this case, because we've done a cost estimate on the improvements so far. We're at about 1.15 million of what they want us to do for the upgrades at Knollwood and taking out, or the upgrades at Inglewood and then taking out the current improvements at Knollwood is about 1.15 million. So there really isn't no extra budget for this 278 million to make a 3/4 access at Knollwood and 210. So that's kind of where I'm fighting back going, wait a second, that's going to lower the participation then at Inglewood and 210 if you're going to push a 3/4 access on us. But I don't think the 3/4 access is the right thing for the long term. You either leave it as Inglewood is today at Knollwood with no signal light and just a stop condition, or you put the RCI in so that you can make the U-turn movement. That's where I'm kind of at, but I needed the city council to weigh in on the thoughts of where you're going. And that's also why SEH has got a traffic engineer listening tonight to represent the city of Baxter on where are we going to go with that 210 corridor study with MnDOT. When the draft comes, we're going to have to comment and take a stance on where we stand on that report. So there's a lot of things going on here. We're trying to get the Inglewood Drive built next year, but then MnDOT is also pushing some stuff that really isn't approved by any bodies yet. It ain't approved by MnDOT. It's not accepted by the city of Baxter. They got some big improvements at Memorywood and 210. They got some minor improvements at Meredith and 210. There's a proposal to take the 4-lane out, that there'd be no 4-lane after County Road 48 out to the west city limit lines. It'd go back to a 2-lane in order to get an acceleration lane at Memorywood. There's a lot of things going on that's coming at the council in that report.
Trevor, I know that we're short on time and we may need to continue this at the next meeting, but can I try to get through the presentation just so the council has a first look at everything?
Sure.
And still definitely ask questions if you have any. So I've moved to the east and we are now at Foley Road. at Inglewood Drive. And this typical section here is generally representative of this red line here. And what we attempted to do here, or the plan we have is, we have the right and through lanes that we need on westbound Foley. And then coming eastbound, we have the left turn and through lanes that we need for this intersection to operate at an acceptable level of service. The frontage road here to access to these approximate properties. And doing that allows us to have a left turn lane in here, and we have a bypass lane into here. So I feel like we have a pretty good plan. We also are lengthening the turn lanes on Trunk Highway 210 to 500 feet, and this is per MnDOT policy, and that is paid. That is what some of the 1.2 million is going for. Improvements on Trunk Highway 210. I'm gonna jump to the next one. Yeah, so up here at Fairview, this is going to be a three-way stop. Southbound Inglewood, east and westbound Fairview, stop, and then northbound Inglewood does not stop. You keep going. And we're adding a new signal on Trunk Highway 210, pedestrian crossing, crosswalks, and then pedestrian connections. Let me see, did I grab everything? Yeah, I think that's generally, I'm going to jump to the next slide. This is more information. We're relocating the crossing to Inglewood. It's a two-way stop condition on Foley. So if you're on Foley, you stop. If you're coming off of Trunk Highway 210, you just keep going to Foley and you make your left turn or your right turn and go on your way. This area through here, it's going to be 22 feet. I'm sorry, the frontage road is 22 feet face to face the curb. There is a boulevard area between the frontage road and the trail, and then between the trail and the roadway. And we do anticipate that there would be space there for trees or landscaping, some beautification along that corridor. And then just this top image is what was in the feasibility study from 2020. And you can compare that to what we have in our current layout. So it's similar. There's just a few modifications. And we looked at the traffic operations here, and it's included in the memo. It'll be expanded upon in the ICE report, but we think it's going to function pretty well, and it's going to be a nice improvement. I like to call it right-sized. It's not more than is needed, but it's adequate. And in the context of an urban area, it may get busy sometimes, but that's what you would expect in Baxter in the summer. So me continuing east. So generally from Inglewood over to Forthen, it's in FDR with trail improvements, and it's a stop condition on Forthen Road.
Recording in progress.
Next, east of Forthen, we're going to extend the trail, the 10-foot wide trail, and make ADA improvements along here. And I feel like this extension makes sense because it does a nice job of getting folks down to the commercial area. So this is Elder Drive right here, and then just on the other side of that is Home Depot. And then the last improvement we have is just for Forthen Road, Isle Drive. It's going to become the through movement, and this is consistent with the long-term city plan for making that west side road connection along the entire city of Baxter. And then the east leg of Forthen Road would tee in, and it would be a stop condition. We also just briefly looked at making that a roundabout. it is consistent with what you see on the corridor further to the south on Isle Drive. And it does, although the intersection as a T does not experience delay at all. As a T intersection, it operates at level of service A, which is the best you can get. But this is also a nice improvement that the council could consider for this intersection. Yeah, Mr. Cross?
Yes, just one question. If that's going to be our through road from basically the north all the way to the south, what happens when this crosses Glory Road? Are we going to change that stop sign configuration to make the north-south be the through road?
I think that's a question that Trevor should answer. I don't know if we would do that with this project. And we would definitely want to run warrants on that if that's something the council would want us to look at.
Well, you now have a roadway that basically goes all the way from Pine Beach down to Mapleton Road with only a stoplight on 210. Well, there are some other stop signs in there, but
No, I appreciate that comment. That's a really good comment of what happens.
No, it's something that we would have to take and look at. We can certainly take a look at that. I mean, Pete's got the long-range transportation plan that WSB did for the corridor. And I don't know if there is a implementation plan in there to change that intersection or not as the corridor is developed. But we should take a look at that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Trevor, maybe that makes sense to have a paragraph or just a recommendation in our ICE report about that. Since the ICE report concentrates up here over on Inglewood, but we also do talk about Forthen and Isle, and then we talk about Knollwood and Foley. We could certainly talk about implications down here.
We'll come back with an update memo to the council on it.
And then this just reiterates that we're looking for council consensus. It allows us to move forward and digging into some of the additional work that we need to move this project forward. And with that, I'll say thank you very much for your time and more discussion and questions.
Any last minute suggestions or comments, Council, before we?
Mayor and council, I mean, there was enough questions asked tonight that I think that staff and consultants need to come back with some more information. So I don't think we're ready to say, do we have consensus on this layout, is my opinion. So I think we should bring it back to the next workshop, if that's possible, Mayor.
I'm fine with that. I don't want to rush things either. So if we've got the time and I think that's best. Yeah. I appreciate that we're moving quicker than we have been to get that input and so on and so forth. And this is definitely a great first start.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, Council, if you think of something during the meeting, we still have council comments and administrators' time that we can talk about it also. Okay, seeing nothing more then, we'd look for a motion to adjourn the workshop.
So moved.
Motion by Cross,
Second.
second by Alessio. Any further discussion? Roll call?
Cross,
Yes.
Licio,
Yes.
Cabot,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
and Olson.
Yes. And we will take 5 and we'll be right back.